אני שומע, כן. אני יכול, אני יכול.
אפשר לשמוע. גם כן אני לא לשמוע.
אם הם לא ידברו, הם ישמעו. אם הם לא ידברו, הם ישמעו. שעה שתילות.
The Tarikh Gimel Tamuz was and is a Tarikh the Lubavitch of Chabad.
English.
No, that wasn't English.
Not enough.
So the date of Gimel Tamuz was and is a date prior to the whole Inyan 24 years ago, Gimel Tamuz Toshin Mondar. And that is that Gimel Tamuz was what the Rebbe calls openly in the Dvar Malchus, he calls it the Aschalta de Geula. It was the beginning of the release and the miraculous redemption of the Rebbe Rayatz from his imprisonment in communist Russia, in Tofreish Peizain. And it was connected with miraculous events which occurred on that particular day. So that would tend to indicate that there's a close connection between Gimel Tamuz, it was and is by Chassidut Chabad, prior to the Gimel Tamuz that entered our lives in Toshin Nundav. So there must be an integral connection between them. And we could suggest that the Indian is that there's an old saying in the English vernacular that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. That how do you know if the pudding is a good pudding? Only if you eat it. Or if the pudding stands on the table, then you don't know whether it's a good pudding or not. You only rely on the hearsay. So all we have to do is examine what has and is happening for Lameinu there from the time of Yud Beis of Gimel Tamuz, how it was 24 years ago at Ashur. והוא שידוע on Gimel Tamuz way back in Tofreish Peizain, when the Frierdiker Rebbe miraculously was moved from his imprisonment in the terrible Spalerki prison, and he was moved out into so-called exile in the city of Kostroma. At that time, it was unknown to the Hasidim whether that was really a positive development or whether it wasn't. Positive it was in the sense that at least he'd been sent out of the terrible situation that he was in the jail. And there'd already been big and positive developments when we get to the sentence which the Rishonim, Rahman and Islam wanted to carry out on the first night that they arrested. And they actually took the Rebbe out to carry out that sentence. And it's well known, the famous miraculous wonder that the Rebbe took to the right down a whole path, and they lost him. And in the meantime, until they found him, there came the order from the big window not to carry out that terrible sentence. So miraculous and tremendous miraculous things that happened before that. But Gimel Tamuz was part of that development. But Chassidim didn't know if the river was going to be Golas for several years out in the depths of northern Russia and Siberia. That's where Kostroma was. If that was a good thing over, it was maybe a hemshech of a terrible development represented by the Klolas Amaita, the imprisonment. And therefore, on the one hand, there was a certain relief and rejoicing of a sort that the Rebbe was out of the prison. But nobody really knew what was going to be the hemshech. Both benegir to the private welfare of the Rebbe and benegir to the whole ufarachta and the whole amazing ispakta of the work of the Frierdiker Rebbe in communist Russia. And it was only later, when the actual Geula occurred on Yud Beis Tamuz, that Chassidim began to realize that what had happened on Gimel Tamuz was the beginning of the Geula, Ashkalt the Geula, the Lashon Rebbe, and it was the beginning of a whole new era of Lamayla Me'ateva Legamri, even though Adkan had also been completely not B'derech HaRogel Klal. So what I want to suggest is the same thing, but again, Gimel Tamuz, but again, Linyanaynu. Here we are, the Rebbe built up a tremendous enthusiasm prior to Gimel Tamuz, but again to the Geula Shleimo. And if, I don't know if you people are familiar, but it's worthy to take a look over there. There's a sefer that was given out about 3 years or 4 years ago already, by Farbrengen, I think. I'm not sure who actually. It's called Yemei Segula. It's like a soft book, but it pictures day by day the developments of the Rebbe's encouragement of the certainty of the imminence of the Geula. And these inyonim were both privately to private people and beklal to the Chassidim beklal, and they were both biksal, and they were both Baal Peh, and all sort of ways of remez and enthusiasm by the big Farbrengen. So it reached a point where there was a tremendous build-up in the whole certainty and waiting breathlessly for the Izgalas of the Geula Shleima. And Kamugan of Poshet, Kol Mishi Eshlei, Moya Tuchat Kodei would be able to realize that that would be connected with the central figure of the Rebbe. That's where things were holding when Gimel Tamuz, what you might call hit the world, the infant Gimel Tamuz Toshin and Tal. But Miller asked itself the question, was that a good thing, or was it in inverted commas, bad thing? Was it a negative step that took things away from it? So my answer to that is that this evening I want to just put a case that the answer to that is that Gimel Tamuz is not only the taking away of things, chas v'sholom, but it's the beginning of the hemshech leading to the ultimate, what you might call, realization of the Yemei HaSegula that began 24 years ago. And I want to sort of present that in three, as it were, different inyonim, 1, 2, 3. First off, let's take the practical situation of the world in which we find ourselves, Bereg Zeh, at this particular moment. Now, I'm not amongst those people who hear intimately the news, and I can't claim to be, informed with all the latest bulletins and all the latest, internet releases and all the misers, but I do hear news, and mostly I hear from very reliable sources, and a small minimum amount I see myself. And if we only examine what is happening at the moment in the world, but let's do it in a way where we're not trying to hammer any particular line. We're just, as it were, examining fairly things that are happening at what you might call a tremendous closing, but again, to those Yemei Gula that were right on the eve of Gimel Tamuz Topsin Nondalit. And let's see if they really ceased, or if in effect they've kept going. But it's just that Hashem has had a tremendous Rahmanas on us. He's made it more obvious than anybody who examines with a little bit of fairness and openness those in Yonah, which are happening. He has to fairly reach certain conclusions, or at least permit himself to be pleasantly surprised. And that is that we see that all sorts of amazing things are happening in the world, leading towards what must be the guiding hand of Melech HaMashiach. I don't think it's possible to understand things which are happening. And I just give one or two quick examples. I don't want to hold people up, and I don't want to hold myself up, but we'll sort of give just a few very obvious things. And that is, it will take a few months ago, or even less, there was a raving Meshuggah in Korea that he said he was going to blow up the whole of America with an atom bomb. And he has that ability to do that. And he said that if people don't calm down, he's going to blow up parts of the world as well. Blow them up off the face of the globe. And as far as I understand, he has the ability to do that also. What happened the last few days, I can't claim to intimate knowledge, but I think probably people around this table probably know better than me what happened. Of the President of the United States, who he threatened that he was going to blow him off the face of the earth, have passed a few weeks, and they meet on the soil of the United States and shake hands like two buddies. They're the most perfect comrades in arms or without arms. They signed an agreement to get rid of the arms, and they embraced one another and looked the best buddies in the world. It just doesn't make any sense, apart from all sorts of other inyonim which have happened, and again to this particular President of the United States, that he has ruled all sorts of inyonim which can only be interpreted if you just look at it in a Jewish way, and ever say Yiddish, a beg. If you look at it, then you have to say that something is pushing this guy. It's a posik mafurish in Mishlei that Leiv Malachim, Leiv Sorin, Yad Hashem. He doesn't do anything on his own. Well, I suppose he does within, according to the Rambam, maybe within certain areas he does. Or in the main issues which have got to do with him as a melech, Leiv Malachim, Leiv Sorin, he's beyond Hashem. And Hashem wants to go to Shlema for sure. And Vayaminu be'Hashem uveMoshe Avdei. Ever since Kriyas Yamsuf, there's a close link between Hashem and Emerson Moshe Avdei. So Moshe Avdei must in some way be intimately informed or involved or doing something in this whole amazing picture that we see that there's like an amazing closing, and it's accompanied by all sorts of other events which are occurring around the world where certain authorities, other shahs, have just been ruling the world with this terrible dictatorship of inhuman terror and error and everything that represents and they've been running the whole world. They're beginning to lose their hold very, very, very swiftly. And it appears that in this particular day, certain Goyim have said that they feel that the so-called Israeli regime, or whatever you like to call it over here, I don't know exactly what to call it, but nonetheless, it's also in the hands of Hashem, except that they have Bechira. But it seems that their Bechira, it may be moving in a better situation than it was. However, Goyim are saying that they don't think that the tafkid, the job of Yidden is only to blow up terrorist organizations that they have military success, or, you know, to come out on a good side with the United Nations, etc. The purpose of the Jewish people is to guide all the Goyim in the world and show them a leading example of how you're supposed to really be in this world. And I remember I was in the Medinas, Australia, about 8 years ago already, and I met up with a leading non-Jew, a very, very leading person, and he then said to me, he said, listen, there's a problem with you guys. He said, you guys are not really doing what is your real message that everybody would like you to take. And if you take that step, then you'll be very, very accepted. That's what he said to me. So I said, what is the step, you know? He said, you got to stop talking about how many weapons you want. And he said, you got to start talking about how you are the leaders of the world. And people want to know, what do you have to say? What is your opinion? Yeah, we've heard enough of all this baloney. Ad can. Yeah? We want to start knowing, what do you guys really say? And I would suggest that every day that goes by right now, more Goyim are saying that. And I've heard that in America and other countries, and even in my homeland in Australia, I've heard that there's hundreds of people, maybe it can even be described as daily in the United States, but in weekly for sure, that people are going over, they're leaving behind the Goisha values, and they're going over to Shiva Mitzvahs B'nai Noya, in a convinced and happy way. How much I tried to say that by any Yehudi. It's a positivity. Yeah? And you've got huge groups, without being married, because I brought in, you got huge groups of Goyim that they want to be Mitgayer, they want to become Yidden. They say it's not enough for them just to hear about Jewish values, they want to be part of it. And can you cut that there's a big problem by certain world we're wanting, what are we going to do with all these guys that want to become this guy? How are we going to be Megayer and what are we going to do and how's it all going to work? Now it's just absolutely mind-boggling, and it's mobile. And to use the American expression, it's upwardly mobile. It's not just mobile in the sense that it's moving around a little bit, it's going upwards. And so there's this amazing movement towards an ultimate goal within the Goyim, and they're anxious to be told the truth. They want to hear what is the emes, what is the real inyan of belief in Boyer Olam Oman Higoy. And the interesting thing is that they're not prepared so much, if to accept the so-called other opinions. What I want to have opinion of dollars, and that's why in Biyomim Eila, the so-called Neutrim, of dollars, are making all sorts of campaigns to try and win back because they're losing. They're losing in big. They're losing in big, and they're losing in their control over countries. In England, for example, I hear from one or two of my Talmudim who live in England that the so-called Neutrim are losing in big their whole control over public opinion. And others are saying. And just we go back a few years, the chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs at that time, who he learned under me in the year Toshin Kovtet in Chabad. He was a Talmud of mine, yeah. Jonathan Sachs. Yaakov is his real name, Yaakov Sachs. And I was very close with him then. And so for him, there was a big issue that they faced in England with Manahu, that the so-called public authorities, they wanted to cancel out the Sunday rest, Sunday, okay, whoever wants to go, $1 billion, let him go, but no day of rest, all the shops will be open, all the buses and trains, everything. That's what they wanted. So they went to the clergy, so-called, and asked their opinion. So the first person that they asked was Jonathan Sachs, and he was then the chief rabbi. And the big leaders of their church were very angry. How come they approached a year before they approached them? And so some of them, the newspaper guys, answered, because he talks better sense than you guys do. That's what they answered him, on the spot. So what did he say? It's very interesting. What did he answer? He said, they're wrong, you must not do that. He said, you must have your day of rest. You must keep a day of rest for the Goyim, and you must not turn it into a public, hoo-ha day just like any other day. And he said, people go out on picnics. So I said, that's a good thing. At least the family gets together and goes on a picnic. So the father tells the children the story. Instead of hearing all the schmutz that they hear, they hear something nice from their father. And that occurs on the day of the rest of the Goyim, on Sundays. So he said it's a good thing that it should be. Jonathan said, I say, I think it's up. And the English people were out of their kalim with enthusiasm for his opinion. And they said, isn't that amazing that a Jew could come to such a conclusion? They thought for sure he will say, yeah, who needs your crazy Sunday? That's what they thought he was going to say. And when he came out with that, come on man, look, what do we see from all that? That the Goyim are all, it's all gradually moving under the hands of the Jewish people. But man, all he could do is want, that it should be that way, and that's the way it will be. The trouble is that we're all, who knows what Pliny will say, and maybe, the leader of my party's not going to like it, or, okay, it's a. But if we just come out and we're confident followers of the Rebbe, then we're going to just see that everything is just closing in, everything is fitting in, and taken from Miyad Mami. That's the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You don't have to worry what happened on Gimel Tamuz. I don't claim to know exactly what happened. I'm not from those who belong to the depression camp. And I don't belong to the Hilula camp either. I don't believe that Gimel Tamuz is a Yom HaHilula. Because what happens on a Yom HaHilula, I remember I heard from the old Rav in Bnei Brak, he said, Yom HaHilula, he said, Hilula. He said, everybody comes together And they all remember, oh yeah, the Bala Elula, he was a great person, and they tell a bit about his greatness. And then what do? They say L'chaim, everybody L'chaim, and then they get up and they say Aleinu, and they spay out on the, by Aleinu, you spit, you know. So they spit on the floor, and then they go home and sleep out, you know, sleep. Gimel Tamuz is not such a day. Gimel Tamuz is a day where you have to be mishchazi, to do what the Rebbe wants us to do, v'simcha, u'b'toik v'aki otzum, mitoik yediyah, that it's all happening. If remember, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And the eating, if you examine it properly, then you have to read it. So it's amazing. I travel on taxis a lot because I can't drive anymore. So I travel on taxis. So I met a taxi driver once. He knows me slightly. And I haven't known him a little bit. I picked him up on the street. So that's not from my usual guys, you know. But he knows me a bit. So when we got to the end, I wished him a good and then I said, you know, the Gula Shoima, Be'ez Hashem. I say that to all of them. So he sort of, he said, oh yeah, he said, you know, halavai, you know. So I just took a minute and I said, listen, take a minute off your driving and just look carefully at the world and then tell me what you think. Yeah. You have a point. And then he drove away and I was happy. I changed his look for a moment. You understand? He said, you have a point. Yeah, you have a point. Oh, I mean, that's the what we've got to do. We've got to switch the whole cook, you know. It's not a hilula, oh, everybody says, oh, the Rebbe was wonderful, you know, the Chaim, you know, and you say Mishmagid, and, you know, all the beautiful things. And you get up, you go home, and you slosh the place, and it's the same old world as it was the day before. Nishta day. Gimel Tamuz is the day where we all have to get together and be mishchazi, in what the Rebbe wants of us. Just, you know, put your finger, how they call it, you know the famous story with Rebbe Chadina Ben Doisa, I think it was. It's a medrash in Medrash Kohelet, that he once came out and he was Bisman Habayit. I mean, many of the great Tanoim were still Bishnei Habayit. And he came out, Rebbe Chanina Ben Doisa, and he sees a beautiful stone, a beautiful, beautiful stone. And he said, oh, I'd like to donate that stone to the Berek Habayis. You know, I'd like to give it to the Beis Hamidrash, that if there's anything they need to put in a wall or something, that's a beautiful stone. And the Beis Hamidrash is do the best of everything. He said, but I don't know how I'm going to get it to Yerushalayim. He was a long way away from Yerushalayim, but it was a big stone. So the next thing is he meets up with 5 guys, as they state in the Medrash, Chamishan, Jim, he met up with them, and all of a sudden he looks at all these guys, these Shalom Aleichem guys, you know, and they said, Shalom Aleichem, Chanina Ben Doisa, what is your problem? You know, what is it? I said, I don't have any problem. He said, I'd just like to donate this stone to the Beis Hamidrash. So they said, oh yeah, no problem. And in a few minutes, he found himself standing in Yerushalayim, outside the wall of the western wall, the Beis Hamidrash, how it was in those days. And he's got the big stone there, and he's looking for these guys, you know, where are they? So it turns out that they were Malachei Hashorim. They were angels. It's a mitzvah. But one thing they asked of him, it's very interesting. You know, they said, no problem, we'll get it up to the Beis Hamidrash for you. All we want you to do is just put your finger on the stone. That you have to do. So Rebbe Chanina reached up, put his finger on the stone, and that's when it moved. And then it all took off, and it was there in the Beis Hamidrash. So all he got to do is reach out your finger and put a finger, Rabbeinu Shalom. But you have to do it because you really want to be in the Beis Hamidrash. You want to be there, if you never put out your finger, we'll meet up with the Malachi Yashur. We're already meeting them. I mean, things which are happening can only be explained. Malachi Yashur are getting busy around here. Hashem is telling them to get moving, you know, to get things done. There, that's number one. And what I'm saying is to throw up in a bucket or a drop in the ocean. There's so much happening. I'm just sort of saying just a few little leaders. And the other thing is that we see there's a thing called Igros Kodesh. There's a thing called the Rebbe's letter. If we examine the whole Indian of the Igros Kodesh, it sort of came about in a most unusual and amazing fashion. When there was the whole Torah with the Sforim, you know, they were trying to take the Sforim away from the Rebbe's library, but the whole big Indian, in the middle, the Rebbe had several meetings with the lawyer, you know, or with the lawyers, Rabbi, together with the leading Siddim, who were helping with the campaign. So once they're sitting with the lawyer, and the lawyer's talking about the different factors that are going on in the case, talking about the different factors going on in the case, all of a sudden the Rebbe comes out, and the Rebbe said, I would like all of my correspondence to be printed. So everybody can figure what's got to do one with the other in the chat. And all of a sudden the Rebbe came and the Rebbe said, all of my Igros Kodesh that can be got hold of, I would like them to be printed. And the Siddim collapsed from absolute surprise, because the Rebbe had always spoken about the Frierdiker Rebbe, about the Rebbe Marad, the Rebbe Rashab, about their letters. He never mentioned his letters. All of a sudden he said he wants his letters to be published, out of nowhere. And so it caused a tremendous upheaval of feeling and of understanding in the public. People couldn't figure what's going on, what does the Rebbe want with it. And now we see what he wanted with it. It's just not b'derech hateva how people get answers in the Igros Kodesh. I am approached by a lot of people, by people from Chabad, people from Nachlas Chabad, and approach with me for helping them with working out things that the Rebbe said to them, because they don't understand the Rebbe's very complex language, and they need help to understand their letter. And it's mind-boggling how people are being guided openly in their lives by the Igros Kodesh. So once again, if you're a Morosh Kodesh, you come and say, oh, Lord, just happens, you know, I don't know how to figure all this. But if you're just open to the fact, because they're fact, and you face the situation, you can see that the Rebbe is openly communicating with his Siddim through the Igros Kodesh. The other Rebbe, I would say to you, like this, it's brought down in Maimarei Chazal, that there's a miler in a Igeres, Lagabi a Sefer. In other words, a Sefer is a dover kabua, a fixed thing. It gets printed, and it's got its limitations, and its chapters, and its synonyms and that. A Igeres is something that sort of you carry around. You can move it around with you wherever you go. You got your letter in your pocket. And therefore, a letter has in itself a milah that is beyond limitation. It's higher than Hagbodah. Therefore, the Megillas Esther is called an Igeres. Right at the end of the Megillah, twice, it's written that Mordechai Esther wrote an Igeres HaPurim Hazoi. And then it's written Igeres HaPurim Hazoi Sasheni. And you have to touch according to the minute Chabad, you have to touch the Megillah when you say that. And before you begin reading the Megillah, you have to open the whole Megillah and roll it up, Igeres, like a letter. And what is written about the Megillah? It's written about the Megillah that the Megillah is Gilui Atzmas Ein Sof. You realize what that is? There's no name of a Kodesh Baruch Hu Begolui in the whole Megillah. And the Ibn Ezra brings that down at the beginning, right at the beginning of the story of the Megillah, and he answers over there a certain, what you might call, teretz. He's magvir, a certain Indian al derech, what you might call purish portion, why it's like that. Comes along citizen says that the message of the Megillah is so immense that it's higher than all the names. It's higher than all Hashem's name. And therefore Hashem's name is not written there because he can't write his name there. It's too high. And the Atzmas is mitgaleh, boruklo in the whole Megillah. And that's why there's no name of Hashem. And each called an Igeres. And many Lubavitches that you have to open it like a Igeres, and you have to shake it at the end when you mention the word Igeres. In other words, that it's an Igeres. And Davki, because the Igeres is not fixed, and it's not a firm, safer. It is like what you call a Lamaila Medida, like Davki there, the Atzmas can chap. Davki there, that which is Lamaila Mishemet, can dwell, or be in a sefer, which is a Torah, how do you call it, Mugdar, where you do it in a sefer lavdavki, it's Shema in a sefer, and Shema's Gevoyim, over upon the infant Shema. Masha came the Igeres, Hapurim, Masay, at the infant the Megillah. Avamera, that's a mile of Igeres. And therefore the Igeres Koidesh is the Koicha Atzmiyah. The Igeres Koidesh is how the Rebbe is beyond the whole Gesher, and he's answering and he's guiding and he's giving here and he's giving there. And it's things that happen in front of our eyes. So come along all the Morris and they all say, oh yes, but maybe it just happened that way, maybe this here, maybe that, maybe don't exaggerate it. Nobody's exaggerating. It's happening in front of your eyes. That's another reason why I would suggest that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And the third thing is, we got here tonight a group of boys from a yeshiva. Or at yeshivas here in Tzfat, here at Kodesh, and how many Talmudim learn in yeshiva in Tzfat? 300 plus, 300 plus. Do you know how many 300 plus? That's a huge, a tremendous amount of butter. And they're all, I don't know how they pack them in over there, but they do. They pack them in. And then you got another yeshiva, you got what they call the Tmimei Torah. They're also, not sloppy. And you got here, and you got there, and you got this. Right? Lubavitch is just flourishing. Lubavitch, the so-called, how do you call it, Job's comforters, when Gimel Tamuz occurred, they wrote huge articles in the world press. Lubavitch was a great thing, but now who knows what's going to happen? It's all just going to burst. It's all going to kill him. It's growing and shluchim all over the world and becoming more powerful. Every day you hear about a new base Chabad. Lubavitch is on the up and it's functioning and betnufa hakiyatzuma. And people are pouring into 770 and all over the place. So this one holds that way and this one holds that way. That's a bit unfortunate. But nonetheless, they all come together one way or another. It all sort of, even though they want to tread on one another's toes occasionally, they end up being together. That's the way it is. I ask you, what is the pshat? What is it? I'm being adequate. I'm asking rhetoric questions, what's called in grammar a rhetorical question. I'm not answering anything, I'm just putting the question into the air. What do you make of all this? And you make of all this, that Chas v'sholem, Gimel Tamuz is not a Hilula. Gimel Tamuz is that the Rebbe's, running the show. Now, I'm just going to finish this piece of the Farbrengen, but a story that happened with me. I told the guys, I don't know if anybody heard it here. He might have heard it, but I don't know if he was listening. It's, I told the other day, the guys in the Midora, that a few years ago, I was in Monroe, upstate New York. Anybody knows what Monroe is? Monroe is a big Sotmar town. There were 26,000 when I was there. That's about 8, 9 years ago, so it's probably even more, a lot more. There was 26,000 families of Sotmarites in them, plus their river. I actually met him, it's a whole story, It's, I was there because I went through under my Talmud, Zayd, Zayd put me through the soul. There was a trust that I had a stroke, Abu Hashem, everything was okay due to my Talmud to Zayd, And he got me through with a big Jewish professor, this, what they call a procedure, where they go through and they get under your brain and they clean it out without actually operating on it. It's amazing business, yeah. So anyway, I got to know a few of the Ungarites in this whole Monroe. And to my amazement, I found out that there's a whole group of these Sotmar Siddim that they learn the Maimonim of the river, But the official Sotmar policy is you're allowed to learn the river Rashab, and maybe you can walk occasionally in the river Rayat. Over the river, you're not allowed to learn, That's the official Sotmar policy. So what do? They learn, and they learn it, guys, and they learn the Torah of the river, and they learn Itvadiot, all sorts of things. So I got to know some of these guys. It was really interesting. I hope this doesn't embarrass them when it comes out over the internet. Anyway, whatever. So I used to daven. Zayd used to have a minyan in the morning, right near Monroe, right near and some of the Sotmar Siddim used to come to the minyan. So after davening, I stay on a few minutes. I have what to do, and so it keeps me busy for a certain period of time after davening. So one morning, everybody left, and I'm sitting here. I'm thinking about how I'm going to get home. All of a sudden, a whole group of these Sotmar guys come in, a whole group of them, and they got all sorts of good Zachen here. They're carrying bread and tin fish and all sorts of mice. And they all drop it on the big table in the middle of the base of Medrash, and they start putting it. I thought, maybe they're making a bris or something. I didn't know what was going on. So I finished, I packed my towels. So one of them walks up to me, he says, Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Gafne. I said, Aleichem Shalom. He said, we're going to make a Farbrengen with you if you don't mind. So I said, wait a second, I got to get home. He said, no, you don't need to go home. You got a whole breakfast here, We can Farbrengen, have breakfast at the same time. That's what he says to me. I said, great. So we sit down, I had a little something to eat, and the next thing is we're in the middle of this big Farbrengen with these Sotmar guys. And they learn at village, it's not just stone. So I sort of presented them with a certain line, and they were listening, and then there was one of them was sitting here, and he was obviously like the one who pushed the whole thing and got it all sort of working. He wanted to put me on the spot in a nice way, not because he was trying to be nasty, but he wanted to try me out. So all of a sudden, he says to me, he said, Rav Gafne, he said to me in Yiddish, he said, all of us, we would like to ask you a question. I said, yeah, Pastor, you know. I didn't know what was coming. So he said, oh, what you said now, you know, is very good. And it makes sense to us. And we like it. Oh, but all that is up to Gimel Tamuz. That's what he says to me. And he sort of looks at me, and then he says, was it not Gimel Tamuz? He said, what's after Gimel Tamuz? Toshin on Tov. That's what he says to me. And he sort of looks me in the eye, you know, and they're all sitting there. So I'm sitting there, they're all sitting, and then nobody's singing, and they're all just looking at me. You know. So what am I going to do? So I straightened my coat, and I took a bit of, you know, how to cut. I caught his eye, you know, you can catch people's eyes. And I looked him firm in the eye, and I said to him, business as usual. You know what business as usual means? It's a business expression. In America, when there's been a problem or a question or something, and then he said, no, everything is back to no business as usual. It's an expression, a very powerful expression in English. In other words, we're all going on, it's just the same as it was before. Business as usual. So that's what I said to him. I never added any explanation. I just looked him in the eye and I said, business. And he was very clever. He was a very clever guy. So he looks at me and he sort of, he peers me in the eye, you know, and he thought for a moment, then he picked up his l'chaim and he said, l'chaim everybody, l'chaim Gafne. And he said, l'chaim, business as usual. And he got all happy. He was all very, very happy. And that's the answer. You understand? Business says, it's all business as usual. Everything is happening, and everything is closing in, and everything is coming, and Melech HaMashiach is closing the hole, you know. You can see it all happening in front of your eyes. It all depends how you look. And that's what the Rebbe told us tens of times. Open your eyes. Don't just look like an altar barabot. Yeah, open your eyes and look carefully and look analytically, and you'll see that it's business as usual. L'chaim everybody. And therefore Gimel Tamuz is a business day, but a big one. It's a day of business, you know, getting involved in the business of a big time. L'chaim everybody. L'chaim. Have a good Gimel Tamuz. I tell you, can everybody hear? Yeah. There's on Thursday night here in the cemetery, after Maariv, at least at the moment, that's the way it is, we learn the Dvar Malchus of the Rebbe. When we say Dvar Malchus, we mean, you know, what you might call the real Dvar Malchus, the final Sichas of Toshin Nomal and Lady. So I just want to mention an akuda which occurs in the Dvar Malchus of this week, Pasha Koirak and Gimel Tamuz, because that year when the Rebbe said the Sikha in Nonalo, it was the same kriya that we have now. It was Pasha Koirak, Gimel Tamuz. So the Rebbe says over there that Gimel Tamuz is a very important date in the whole Geula of the Rebbe Rayatz and Tov Reish Pei Zion. But that was, as we mentioned before, that was the day that he actually got out of the prison and he began the journey to his so-called Goddess, his so-called exile in Kosroma. So the Rebbe said that if you examine what happened at that particular time in Tov Reish Pei Zion, then you can ask a question. The whole Geula of the Rebbe in Tov Reish Pei Zion, it went in what you might call shlabim, how do you call it? Processes or stages. And the first amazing stage was that they arrested the Rebbe Almanat, to carry out on the same evening. They intended, they intended shooting the Rebbe, so they took him into the prison. They went through all but they let him out actually to execute him. And on his way out to the place where they execute, the two guards walked in front of the Rebbe, and in the meantime he saw they were talking, and he turned and sort of moved swiftly down a passage to the right. He didn't know they were taking him to execute him, but he knew something wasn't good. So and it was such a complicated building that it took them an hour and a half to find the Rebbe. In the meantime, there'd come an order from the big window not to carry out the execution. The Chassidim had got moving so quickly, and amongst those Chassidim were the Rebbe himself. As soon as the Rebbe was coming down the street to visit the Friedrich Rizal, just after they took the Rebbe out in the coach and took him to the Spaliaka. And the Rebbe's coming down the street before they even left. And the Rebbe's Rebbetzin, she went up into an upper window, and she saw the Rebbe coming, and she shouted to him in Yiddish that there are guests in the house. She shouted out to the Rebbe that there were guests. So the Rebbe put two and two together that it's not kedai for him to come home, because there's guests. And he understood what that meant. So what did the Rebbe do? Immediately the Rebbe went to a public telephone, and he started making phone calls to people that they should save the Friedrich Rebbe. Yeah. The Rebbe, on the spot, the Rebbe went to a phone booth. He got a public phone working, and he spoke to somebody who knew somebody. And this guy who knew somebody, he knew the wife of another somebody. And this wife, she had a very heavy pull with a big somebody. She was his wife. So she had a big pull with a big somebody. And the Rebbe he called up this guy, his wife, and spoke to her, and she got over that, and she gave it over to her husband, and he got into his head that for the moment they shouldn't carry out the and that's what happened. And eventually the message got through the whole network, and in that hour and a half, Barrett, that's when it arrived, the order not to carry out. So the Rebbe said that that's the beginning of the Nisim. That's only the beginning of the Nisim. And then all sorts of other Nisim occurred. And then there was the final change in their whole policy. In other words, not to keep the Rebbe anymore in a prison, but to send him in so-called dollars to the city Kostroma. And then everybody knows what happened over there. He was only there for about 9 days, and then, or less actually, and then on Yud Beis Tamuz, his birthday, he was walking down the street with two chassidim. The Rebbe had finished davening and he wanted to get some fresh air, he wanted to do a bit of exercise and just breathe fresh air. So they walked with the Rebbe along the street. And the next thing is that a Goyish kid, a young fellow, not a boy, but a young person, was riding on a bicycle, and he happened to be the clerk who worked in the post office. he was in the post office, but he was able to travel around on a bike because that day the post office was locked. It was a public holiday on the part of the communists, had a public holiday for whatever crazy reason, and the post office was locked. You follow? This is Yud Beis Tamuz. And they're walking down the street, all of a sudden he sees the Rebbe, he saw the Rebbe, and he stops his bicycle, and he says, is this guy Rabina? Is he the Rabina? So they said, well, which Rabina do you mean? So he said, there's a Rabina Schneerson, a big one. And they said, oh yeah, this is Rabina Schneerson. He said, listen, I got a telegram, tell him that I have a telegram, but I can't give it to him. I can't, if I open the door, I'll be in a much worse situation than I am now. So I can't open the post office, but you should tell the rabbi that he is free. He said, I got in the post office a telegram saying that he's free. No. So what happened was, that they went home in a very happy mood. They went back, and Reb Michal Dworkin was also there. He was a famous chassid, Reb Michal Dworkin. He was there also with the Rebbe, and when they came in, and they shouted to him that the Rebbe's free, and tomorrow he's going to get the thing. He knew good Russian, because he was a businessman. So he started running around, and he said, we have to make hakofet. But there was no sutra, there was no Sefer Torah. So what did he do? He picked up a Tanya. There was a Tanya on the table. He picked up a Tanya and he held it like you hold a Sefer Torah, and he started dancing around the room, and you know what he sang? He sang, Nyet, Nyet, Nikavor. The Nigan, Nyet, Nyet, Nikavor. That's what he said. And some people say that he made that nigan up because he knew good Russian, and the other city wouldn't have been able to make it up, but he did. And he sang, Nyat, Nyat, the way, that Nigan starts off with like an introduction. And the truth is that Machol walking also is said to be it starts off like high. It starts off to the yadai, yadai, why didn't he make it in one big boom? You know, it could have been a big upheaval of some sort, and the whole prison would break down, and the river would just go out, you know. The whole thing went with Slavim, you know. There was a nurse about the extra Jews, and then there was a nurse about this, and there was a nurse about something else. Yeah, I would have thought that all these programs, here they stay up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, so. And here they were good balabatim and going away before the balabatim. Oh. It's the Chayra Tzori beer, it's not going to help. Oh, the Rebbe says, why didn't it just occur with a tremendous Mailami Ateva? And then it goes out and everything finished. First of all, the nerves are all straight, this occurred, and that occurred, and people are still not sure, and another nurse, and then a further, and then gradually, ultimately there's your bedtime. And then after that, there's even like a further amazing development of the nurse, and that is that gradually the effect of the Friedrich Rebbe became worldwide. The exact opposite of what they wanted. They wanted to cut him out and break the whole power of the spread of Torah and mitzvahs in Russia. Exactly the opposite happened. I don't know, that's a further now. It make it all together, you know, so why all these developments? So the Rebbe said that in order to understand that, we have to just mention one other factor, and that is that on Gimel Tamuz, many generations ago, you know what happened? Yeah, there was the nest with Yeshua that he said, Shemesh begivain doing. They were in the middle of a war, and the sun began to set, and in those days there were searchlights with there. Once it would get dark, then the enemy would escape. And there was no way they could finish the war successfully. So Yeshua prayed to the Evid. He said, Shemesh, the Shemesh should stop, should stand. And then the same with the moon. Instead of the moon coming into the picture, he said, for Uriah, where was Elohim? No. The Uriah also came under control. So the Rebbe said, Yeshua just should have asked the Eberstein for a big nest, that all the goyim would just collapse in the small amount of time that was left of the day. And you don't have to bother, as it were, the Eberstein with this amazing nest, and you have to have a moon out of its orbit and the sun and the whole night. Just make a big bang, miraculously, all the goyim will collapse. And they'll get them all in the short amount of time that's left to finish. Well, that's all we got to do. What do you need the whole big arena? So the Rebbe answers about that. Oh, and then further, in the nest of the Shemin, the given doing, itself, there were different opinions as to what really happened. So one opinion is that Yeshua said to the sun to stop, and even that involved a tremendous mess up for all the other bodies that are moving around. Nonetheless, that's what happened, and he just said, Chai v'kayim, stop, and all the confusion also stopped. Miraculously, there was no confusion, even though there should have been. That's one opinion. The other opinion is that the Eibishter changed hugely the whole universe. He changed the Shemesh, he changed all the other stars and all the orbits and the whole miser, all of them stopped. You know? So the Rebbe said, what's the difference between the two opinions? The first opinion is that the Eibishter said, Chai v'kayim, yeah, too bad about you, nature, there's an S, finished. Everybody just fit in. The second one understands that Enoch and was a big mess, but there was a mess in a lot of other details as well. And as it were, the mess settled into the whole situation of the world and took over all other aspects of Teva, not just the immediate necessity of the sun. Although the Rebbe says the same with Gimel Tamuz and Yud-based Tamuz, it's the same. It's the same thing. The Rebbe said that ultimately what Hashem wants and the ultimate perfection of the world when Mashiach will come is not that there won't be a world and not that things won't find, like the Rambam said at the beginning of one of the Rambam says, that the world will function in a basically normal way, and yet it will be, Mashiach will be a different world altogether with Gilei Alakuras, B'kol HaMekaymas and B'kol HaInonim, but nonetheless the world will be there. So the Rebbe said the same, what the Eibishter wants is that an nest like Yud-based Tamuz should go b'shlavim, that it should enter into the situation until it becomes part of the functioning of the world. And the Teva and L'mayla Teva become one perfection together. And they function one through the other. And the L'mayla Teva unites with the Teva, and it becomes a whole new perfection. That is the ultimate aim of a real net. Yeah. So therefore, it had to go with Shlavim. Had it gone just one bang, or had Yeshua just said, I'm sorry, you just have to dance, and the whole world is just a dance, and that would have been called Shvira Sateva. That's like breaking the Teva. And that's not the Eibishter's way. You know the story about the Tamuz, the guy. Everybody knows the story. Wait a minute, it was the Tamuz, yeah. With the Alter Rebbe, no. That somebody bought the Alter Rebbe cushy way to keep Shmek Tavik. Somebody bought the Alter Rebbe a Tavik pusher, a beautiful silver container that was made for, Shmek Tavik. So the Alter Rebbe took the things, but he didn't use it for Tavik. And so they asked the Alter Rebbe why he didn't use it for Tavik, and the Alter Rebbe said that he didn't want to stoop into such a beautiful sense in the human system. A lot of Gashmi stood into the Chusharei, and therefore snuff is not a good thing. I sort of stood Chumias into the beautiful sense of smell. So what did he do with the Alter Rebbe? He took off the lid, and the Alter Rebbe was sort of slightly bald in the front and towards the side. As his tefillin used to quite often move. So, the Alter Rebbe was very makbid, it should be in the middle. The whole thing about it, the siddur. It's got to do with the whole deal of the Alter Rebbe. It's all beginning. The Alter Rebbe used to be very makbid that his tefillin moved, and he was very not happy about that. And so what he did was he broke off the lid, he took off the lid of this stock of pushkin, and because it was silver, it was very palatable, And he could look at his tefillin the whole time, you know. He had it like in his pocket, he pulled out and his tefillin. So they say that after that, the Alter Rebbe's tefillin never moved anymore. They never moved around. But when he put them straight at the beginning, even though during davening the Alter Rebbe used to get very worked up occasionally, you know that, you know, God. Not like nowadays, you know, Chabad Tsfat is very and not like that. The Alter Rebbe used to tell you. And you know, they had to build cushions around the wall, because the Alter Rebbe used to beat his head against the wall. And once there was a whole business that he split his forehead, and there was a whole shot about the tefillin. He was wearing tefillin. He could have clapped it tefillin. Miraculously, he didn't clap the tefillin, he would clap his head. But anyway, the Alter Rebbe was very, So they say that after that, the tefillin of the Alter Rebbe never moved anymore. No. So somebody came once, and they told this story, and the Tzemach Tzedek was present. And the Tzemach Tzedek said that he never heard that story. He didn't know that had happened. But the guy who was telling the story, he said in Yiddish that the Alter Rebbe broke off the lid. In Yiddish, that Obgebrochen, the Kisui from the Keli, Obgebrochen. Obgebrochen means snap it off. You know. So the Tzemach Tzedek put up his hand and he said, I'm sorry, I believe the Maisa, but I can't believe that prayer. He said, my Zayda, kein Mensch gebrochen, kein Zach. He said, my grandfather never broke anything. His Indian was not to break, his Indian was to build. And he said that you have to say it differently. You have to say, my Zayda slid the hinges off and he got the lid. But he never broke it off. You don't know the story, famous story. And then he said, the Indian from mein Zayda, nicht gewinnt zu brechen, kein Sache. He didn't break anything, he fixed everything, built everything. Anyway, from that, I don't know, what is the whole Indian? The whole Indian of the Abish's Kawan is to build and to make them, not to break them, but to build and to make. So we're going to build a new world. We're going to build it in such a way that the Lamaila Me'ateva, Dira is brought with Tatoinim, doesn't mean that he's just going to look at the world, but be separate. He and the world are going to be one thing. The Aves is going to dwell in the physical world, and the highest Gilel, of course, has to unite with the Eilim, Kipshutai. Of a man, therefore, it has to go gradually. It's got to sort of move in stages. The Avisha could just bring it down and make it that way, but he doesn't want to break. The Lord said it's war, kind of. No terror to break, but to in Shlavim, to make the Lamaila Me'ateva and the terror united. Of a man, I want to tell you guys that that's what we're seeing happening today. Well, that is what is happening. And that's why I pointed out to you before that Gimel Tamuz is not a Hilula and it's not a day of, you know, sitting around saying Tillim and Zogim Mishnayim and Tavazagim, but it's a day of Chizul, because what is happening on Gimel Tamuz is this union of the Teva, Ho'ilam, and a Maila Me'ateva. And what's happening is that it's becoming well known to people all over that things are miraculous, and the Maila Me'ateva is becoming quite a normal, it's becoming a, if you look here in Eretz Yisrael, just look here in Eretz Yisrael, just a few weeks back, I woke up in the middle of the night and they sent two Patriot rockets from about a kilometer away from where I live. So when they send Patriot rockets, they make a big bang. So my wife took out, she went crazy. And I woke up and I hear these big, bangs, a very severe bang. I thought, that's a bit interesting. But I was once in the army, so I made a husband that was planes breaking the sound barrier. That's the way it sounded to me. And that's what I thought, I persuaded her that apparently some planes went over, just hoped there was something good. And, you know, go back and take it easy. And she woke up at about 3:15 in the morning. I said, go back and, you know, have a good night. But that night, the Iranians, Nishka crazy, Hezbollah, Nishkin, the others, Ratzion, but the Iranians themselves had 200 up-to-date, powerful missiles ready and aimed at Eretz Yisrael. And they let them go. And all of them, most of them, fell in Syria. And these have got the most powerful aiming devices on them. It just doesn't make any sense. How they didn't get over the border? Why didn't they cross the border? The missiles. I'm not talking about people. Why didn't the missiles? They didn't, and they fell in Syria, and there was one or two that got just over the border. So these guys up arrived and they set these patches and they blew them up anyway. So all the 200 rockets, not one of them did any damage to Eden. Not one. Gone. 200 rockets. I ask you, you know, what is that? You understand? So the Abishter could have sent a bomb from heaven, and he could have bombed the whole 200 thing and finished. He didn't do it that way. What did he do? He got a few brave Israeli guys that they belong in the army, and they got together in planes and everything. They went over and they made a whole big run. And they were involved with these guys, and then they sent a couple of Patriot weapons. That's what my wife and I heard. And they sent a couple of planes, and they blew the rest of it up. And there was a certain act on Peter. Over the whole thing was like a mile on that terror. We have like a fusion and a terror. And it's happening all around the world, all sorts of things that don't make any sense that I described before in the first talk that we had here, are all working in such a way that the Geula is unfolding, it's happening, and it's beginning to sort of build itself together in the ultimate way that it's going to be, the Sof Kol Hayomim. And it's going in Shlovi, and that's what the Rebbe says in the Dvar Malvus. If we would have learned the Dvar Malvus tonight, we would have learned it, that the Rebbe says that it's going to go in stages. The Gula Shlema is also going to go in stages. And that's what's happening. It's, about a year ago, there was a whole miser with the, down in the south, they sent also hundreds of missiles. They sent. But for some weird reason, not one of them did any harm. And most of them also didn't fall in. So everybody just gets, they turn on the radio and go, you got to look what the Rebbe says, open your eyes. The Rebbe wants us to open our eyes. Don't be just like all the rest of the Balabatim. You got to open your eyes and look at what's going on. The Teva and the Mailam Teva are uniting together. It's going in. The Lashon of the Rebbe is Niknas B'toy Gidrei Holilom. It's gone into the definitive makeup of the world. And that's what's happening. And so the Rebbe says the same in the Parsha with the Matei of Aaron. He said, what happened was they put all these Mateis in front of the orange pages, and Aaron's grew flowers. But it went with a whole Seder. First of all, it brought out flowers, then it brought buds, then it brought out, so it happened swiftly, but it went according to our Seder. And there's a medrash that says it went with a Seder. It didn't just all of a sudden appear flowers. The flowers grew properly. They just did it quicker than usual. And that's what Shkedim do anyway. Shkedim grow quicker than all the other trees anyway. They just want a bit even quicker than what they normally go. But so the Rebbe said, why just make the, just appear the flowers? Why do you have to make it with a whole Seder? But that's the whole ultimate perfection. That's to be in the world itself, the way it is, a miracle. the flowers should go inside the crate. She said, well, it's a miracle. Oh, but when would I say that? When would I sit and say that? And that's happening in front of our eyes. I don't know. How am I going to? That's what's happening. I mean, the Kula Shlema is beginning to close in, you know, it's mamish, that's what's happening. I mean, we've got to realize that that's what the message of the Rebbe is in the Tamuz of this week. And that's how he connected with Gimel Tamuz, the first Gimel Tamuz of the Friedrich Rebbe, but that's what happened there also. It was also like a nest, but it was teva, but it was a nest, and that's the greatness of Purim. Purim was also like that. And yet Purim is Gilui Atzma Sein Sof, nicht stand. Yet Davke, that amazing fusion and that alteration of the world into a dwelling place for Atzma Sein Sof, that is a tremendous change. And that takes, as it were, a certain series of like development to settle into the materials of the world. And that's happening in front of our eyes. And therefore, like we said, the Rebbe works through Igerot. He works through Igeret. And that's what the Megillah is called, an Igeret. It's called, why? Because an Igeret is L'mayla mi Ateva, it's L'mayla mi Madida V'Agbola. It's not a fixed thing. It's, you know, like it's sent to somebody, he puts it in his pocket, and that's it. That's what an Igeret is. Listen, the main thing is, you have to, you know, keep your head. There's no saying in Yiddish, "Daf halten Kopf." You have to hold your head. It's so easy with all these crazy media, and with all the crazy, for example, there's a big thing occurring in the world that there's like a, how do you call it, rebellion against certain big areas of Orthodox medicine, for example. A lot of people say that you have to take all sorts of tablets because there's huge companies that they have promotion from all those tablets. And if all those tablets weren't pumped into you, huge, how do you call it, concerns of firms and businesses wouldn't have panosim. So they don't want to be without panosim. So you've got to take all this medicine, you understand? Oh, with the MS, there's other ways of doing it. I don't know yet necessarily all the way. I don't claim to be. But people are beginning to complain. They're beginning to, rise up against this whole, and it's the same with the media. The media want to rule you. They want you to think what they want. And to a certain extent, the UN and even Iran, they want you to think a certain thing, and certain crazy people on our side of the fence buy that, and that's what you hear on your radio program. Or who knows what, your internet or your television, that are from Yitzhak. That's what happens. So we're all victims of the media. Oh, but the truth is that the emes is, you know what they claim, that's what I heard today from somebody, and I believe it, that just take apple seeds, you know what the seeds of an apple, that if you were to feed certain people enough apple seeds, they wouldn't have got the cancer that they got. No. And even if they did get it, maybe they could have been healed. Of all the big, concerns don't want that should be publicized too much. I don't know, maybe I'm saying the wrong thing. But the thing is, that we've got to be free. We've got to be free people. We've got to really think the right way. We've got to think the way the Rebbe wants us to think. And we've got to look at the world that way. And I made a berega what we will. When you think a good thing, you have much more effect than what you think. And it's not like what people say to you, oh, who am I, what can I do, I can't do anything. It's not right. If you think one good thing, so the Baal Shem Tov says, Vetrat good, Vetrat good. And the Rebbeim used it. And it was a big principle by them. So I think, oh my, oh, you are a powerful unit in the creation. Your thoughts have an effect. They go out and they affect the world. And that's the way that, that's what we're holding God. And that's the message of Gimel Tamuz. That's the message. The message of Gimel Tamuz is positivity and knowing that you can and you will and you're able to affect for good and to do good and to be positive. Don't allow anybody to sell you negativity. Only positivity, only for you. And therefore it's being found that if somebody is persuaded to think positively, and how much more so if he's in a good mood from that and he's happy, then he's a different human being. In the cells of his body, he's a different human being. Not just that he's different in the sense that he's in a better mood, but the cells of his body move differently altogether, because he's happy. We have to be happy, so don't allow anybody to persuade you that Gimel Tamuz is that we are allowed to be happy. You have to be happy, you have to. On the contrary, Gimel Tamuz is the moving into the gear of preparing the Teva and the Ramayana Teva to unite in this amazing fusion which is called the Gula Shlem. And it's happening. And it's going step, step, step. And that's what the Rebbe says in the Dvar Mavet. Say Mashu Omer in the Dvar Mavet. And he said that's why it is that the Eibishter recreates the world every second. He said, what's wrong if he would have created the world once and let it run for X amount of years? And a lot of big authorities hold that way. Over the Baal Shem Tov, every minute he recreates the whole creation. What do you need that for? Because he said every minute the Eibishter is making a whole new, and he's saying to you, listen, I've created a new world, make something out of this whole new world that you got. Every second. And that's what the Pirkei Avos says at the end. Kol mashu bora hakodesh baruch hu lo bora ela lichleidai. He made it for his glory every second. You can add to the whole creation. It's a new creation. And you can reveal that it's a whole new thing. Glory of the Creator. And that's why the Eibishter does it, that we should cash in on that amazing opportunity. You've got a new world in front of you. Just imagine if you were standing now at the first moment of creation and you saw the sun coming up. Just imagine how you go out of your cage. So tomorrow morning, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be going out of your cage. The sun's going up for the first time. Not the millionth, thousandth time or something like that. It's going up for the first time. It's a new Shemesh. It's not the Shemesh that was there when it went down yesterday. Or wherever it was during the night. It's a new Shemesh. Hashem Shalom. That's the Indian guy. And Beis Hashem. Oh, yeah. The truth is, you should realize that I remember when I was in I've been in when I was in university. I'm going back now 60 years or more. I don't like to say how many years I've gone. But I remember all the students got excited. There was a Goy in Meshuggah that he wrote a book. And he called it, I can even tell you what his name was, Lahavdil. And he wrote a book that was called 1984. He thought that by 1984 the world would be. Yeah. And what he painted the whole one from even more Schoen. Everybody was going around. What do you get to with all these people that are heading for doom, you know? It was like when we were kids. They used to walk around the street, these guys that they used to collect money, and they used to have a sign on them with in big letters. In another 3 weeks, the world is going to be bombed, it's destroyed. As my mother do something. You had these guys walking with these signs on them. So people go crazy with him. And they say, what do you want? And say, well, if you give me a minute of money, I'll try to help. So you used to pay him a few groschen. Yeah, what about running like that? And so that's, in effect, that's what this guy told me. So he told me the whole place is heading for doom, and it's going to be run by one crazy, devilish, Liuma's guy, and he's just going to ruin everything. And so the whole message of the Rebbe is the exact opposite. Yeah, everything, pink fakeh, how do they say in Yiddish? Pink kapeh. Kapeh means completely opposite. And that's the situation that we all worry. And the way he is that you've got to be in it, in the world, outside of this world. And that's what the Rebbe said. You have to be in the world and out of the world at the same moment. You've got to be in there, but you mustn't let the world run you. You have to run the world. Don't let it run you. And you have to control your part of the world. And it will be good. And it will be good in the best possible way. Take me out now, Mommy. With the way Moshiach is going to make it, and the way he wants it, and the way that's what it's going to be. And that's going to be the end of everything. And the beginning of everything. The time of everything. Okay, no tragic. It's good. that everybody's trying to find a dignified way out of here. I don't know if there's any such thing, a dignified way, but anyway, whatever. It's, I just want to complete with a few brief remarks, and then we'll free everybody, and everybody to go restfully home. Instead of shopping out, here or there. There's, the way to everything is without learning siddur. You have to learn siddur. And you have to have fixed times to learn siddur. And you have to huck siddurs around. When you learn siddur, you have to, how do you call it, drive it inside your mind. And if you do it that way, then you see that siddur changes everything. And what appeared to be a certain situation can appear altogether different. I'll give you just one example. I won't take long. I don't have any questions, the truth, but I'll just give you one example. And that is, take this week's parsha. You get a guy like Koira. Yeah? So Koira, he had a pretty, to use the expression in English, he had a rather sticky end. He didn't have good Koira. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even pray for him. No, Moshe Rabbeinu said, I don't have Hashem punished these guys. Moshe Rabbeinu was really angry with Koira. And yet, nonetheless, there was a Talmud, there's a Magi called the Chozim Malablim. It appears the Old Rebbe didn't know him. Maybe he knew him, but not well. For whatever reason, I was not time to go into it. The Chozim Malablim was a Levi. He was a Levi. And he said that Koirach is his grandfather. Koirach was a Levi. And so he said, Mein Heilig Kazei de Koirach. My holy grandfather Koirach. So, people were used to it. The Hasidic Rebbes were a bit revolutionary sort of guys, so they were used to hearing, unusual things. But we're sort of hated as they do, his Koirach. So it comes along Siddur Chabad. And Siddur Chabad says that really Koirach, he had a basic idea. And he was the infant Buddha, and the Yosef Love, the Ika power, the Levim of the cloud Buddha, the Ika power is going to be the Gevuras. The Ika Giloi, the Yosef, is going to be the Gevuras, and therefore the Levim, the Alter Rebbe brings it in the 50th chapter of Tanya, that the Levim are going to be the Kohanim. What's going to be with the Kohanim? I'm not sure. Maybe they'll be the Levim. I doubt it. Whatever. The real. So, the Kohanim get brave, when they do this, and the Levim get all puffed up, Oh, that's what's written. It's written in the Kisvei Arizal. That the Arizal says that the Yossi, the Levim are going to be the Kohen. That's what he wanted, Kohen. That's what he said. What's going on around here? Ella is brought down in a Maimon from the Tzemach that Koirach, he was just out of time, adequate. He mistimed his whole thing. What he said really makes sense when the world will have finished its all Seder, and it will be Moshiach, and maybe after Tchias HaMesim. It's time now. Then the Seder will be like he wanted. But Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, but listen, man, that for whatever reason, Hashem is not going to make the world of Moshiach right now. After a certain time, yeah. In the meantime, whether you want it or not, yeah, I'm the Balabas. So Kara said, he's the Balabas? He didn't like that. So what it boils down to is that it's what you might call a snatsus, powerful hitnatsut, That's what ruined Koira. Oh, but really, he had a very high picture, which just wasn't the right time for that. And he messed things up. He wanted to bring in it didn't really go on. And that's why the Chuizer said that Koira is my holy grandfather. It doesn't mean that ultimately speaking, he had something to say. And so what does Chassidus do? Chassidus shows you things that you would never hear elsewhere. You might have heard that the Chuizer and the Lublin said that, but you would never know what is the pshat. You learn Chassidus, and you get wiser. The cat is there in Kolayim, in Koladrim. I'm going to finish now. I see everybody's getting here. I'll finish, but you guys ever heard that in Poland, at the time of the Alta River also, there was a big nobleman that he became a Ger Tzedek. You ever heard of him? He was called the Potocki was his name, Potocki. And he was mitgayer, the Gimel, he became a former year in Poland at the time of the Vilna Gaon. And he became a very, very learned and powerful personality. And so he was a big nobleman. Normally they wouldn't have cheered him, but they saw he's having a big influence. So the king made a plot to put him to death. You follow? So what happened was that in the end, they made a plot against him and they burnt him at the stake. They burnt him on fire. So what happened to him was that he knew that things were sort of running not so good in his direction. He started making all sorts of shigufim and fasts and all sorts of terrible things. And he got so damaged that worms started getting into one of his legs. Worms. And he would pick up the worms and praise them and say, I wonder if these worms are that they're eating him. All sorts of unbelievable things. So the night before they burnt him at the stake, the Vilna Gaon, it's a Pilate Gazette, the Vilna Gaon sent him a message. And he said that I know also Kabbalah. There's one under with the Gimel is a tremendous authority in Kabbalah. He said, I have a way that I can say a certain name and they won't be able to burn you. You'll get out of the prison. It'll be all right. You know what he answered him to Poltoski? He said, I have the opportunity to give a Mekayim Kiddush Hashem. I don't want you to save me. I want to go. I want to be Mekayim. Start back from that. And then show me. So they burnt him at the stake right moment. And you know what happened? On that spot where they burnt him, there's grown up a huge tree. And in Poland, they grow trees. But not big trees. But this is huge. A huge tree. And everybody visits it. Those who visit that particular city all go there. Look, there's this beautiful, huge tree. Grew up at exactly the same spot where they burned him. So you know what? Rebbe Paritzer, a couple of generations later, Farbrengen one night with a whole group of not so Lubavitcher people, and they said to him the greatness of this Poltoski. You know what Rebbe said? He said he was an unbelievably great man, but he never learned Chassidus. He didn't have the... And he said, had he learned Chassidus, the whole picture would have been different. He said, first of all, he wouldn't have made all those fasts, and he wouldn't have had worms eating him. And secondly he would have taken the opportunity to save himself. Why? Because he could serve the Abishter and bring out a Kush into the world X number of years, ad infinitum. You follow? He said, but only if you learn Tamimus Ater and you learn Siddur, only then you can know that. You follow? Azay, you can't know that. Ad can't do right. Rebbe Paritcher. Das ist gesagt, Rebbe. Amen. He had a Breitkeit von a Rebbe, but that's, he said, had he known Chassidus, you would have been even greater, even despite the fact that he was unbelievably great, but in a positive way. Everything is positive, but it opens up new vistas. And so the other night I was talking with somebody, and he said something, why in the Babish don't they learn Kabbalah? So I said, well, I'm not saying they don't, but they do and they don't. That's the whole story. Yeah, in the Babish we do learn Kabbalah, but we don't. He said, why don't you learn Kabbalah? So I said, because the tfisa of Chassidus is a whole different tfisa, In Yiddish, it's called a cup. It's a whole different, it's incomparably different cup. It's a whole different graph of what existence is all about. And that's Chassidus, not just Kabbalah, but Chassidus. And when you learn Chassidus, you have a whole different look, a whole different cup. The Rebbe has taken all that wondrous gift and he's brought it into our blood that we are here. Our job is to bring Moshe out. Oh, you're a schlepper and you're this and you're that. Hey, but that's your job. That's the job you've been given. And we're merely use the sinners to do it that way. And we're merely look at the world differently, live differently, and be besimcha, and be b'harchova, and everything, b'teiva, nira, v'nigla, look positively and know that Moshiach is closing in. He's closing in, and it's going to be, there's a lot of crazy philosophers that they said that the world was created with a big bang. It wasn't created, but just all sorts of gases made up together and made a huge bang. So I would like to suggest to you that Moshiach is going to be the emes of Big Bang. It's going to be a whacking great bang. But it's going to be a pleasant bang and a bang of Gilei Elokuz B'Kol Ha'olam. And the unity of the L'mayla V'Yateva and the Teva Gam Yachad. And the Rebbe is going to be in the middle of the whole thing, my dear people. That's the way it is. And Hashem should help us so we all be zeicha, gesundheit, and freiligkeit to all meet together with the Rebbe on Har HaBayis and Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, and then we'll make a Farbrengen with the Balabatim Ha'Gol. The Farbrengen will just go on. It'll be Farbrengen at the Mile Race, at Penimis Batzman saying so. With a simple Batov, play well before him, does it become tonight. But we may have a new life, and start a new life, and have a new life, and learn Chassidus, and I promise you that you'll have a new life, and it'll be a good one. Hashem should, and it will be a good life. And Hashem will help that we won't see any more negative things and painful things. We should only give it a cause. Your union is a mile on your Teva Gimel. Have a good evening. Have a good Erev Shabbos. And Shabbos in Milizay, Ula Kuri Belovay. And even more than that, Shabbos in Manucha L'chai Yilom.
Amen. Chai.